Imagine for a moment, a time that comes only once a year, a winter wonderland with chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Jack Black nipping at your nose. The time is Christmas, a time to spend with others, a time to give rather than receive, a time of love, peace, and family. But I don't have any of those things. I'm a gamer. Video games are my family. I don't care about anyone else. So this season, I'll get into the festive mood by playing some holiday-themed video games. It turns out there's actually not a lot of major Christmas games, I guess. I mean, there's Dead Rising 4 and some Saints Row 4 DLC. So it turns out most Christmas games these days are just cheap shovelware, crappy licensed games, and I guess occasionally AAA games that just so happen to take place on Christmas. I mean, there's also indie games and mobile games, but that's a whole thing right there, and I don't feel like talking about it. Don't even get me started on ROM hacks and homebrews. But anyways, there were lots of Christmas games and applications on computer systems in the 80s and 90s. After all, those were a haven for smaller developers before digital releases became common. But there really weren't any original Christmas-themed games released for mainstream consoles at the time. Actually, there was one, Daze Before Christmas, developed and published by Funcom and Sunsoft in 1994 for the Sega Mega Drive and Super Nintendo. This game never made it out of Australia and Europe though, with the Mega Drive version never even leaving Australia. This is one of the only physically released original Christmas game for consoles, so I guess I have to play it now. Our epic story begins when Santa's greatest enemies, the louse, the cold, the evil snowman, and the timekeeper take over the North Pole for some reason and capture all the elves. I don't know who any of these people are, by the way. Also, there's a magic potion that turns Santa into his evil twin, Auntie Claus, not Krampus. So Auntie must be Santa pick presents all the way to face the foes so bravely and make it through the day. Okay, so this game is off to a start. I like the advent calendar level screen, and the fact that every level has its own title card. It's the little things that make these games a little more likable. The actual game though is a pretty bare bones platformer. You run to the end of the level, jump over things, and shoot snow at enemies. What more can I say? You also collect presents throughout the levels. Blue ones are like coins in Mario. Red ones contain random surprises. You might find enemies, health, or just an elf, which does absolutely nothing. Gold ones, however, always contain good items, like extra lives and checkpoints. So yeah, this is most of the game. The level variety is pretty diverse though. There are indoor levels, outdoor levels, caves, factories, and these weird otherworldly places. The visuals are all nice, so at least the game doesn't feel so repetitive in that regard. But some levels are shorter than others, like the second level, Let It Snow, which is just 25 seconds of you running and shooting enemies, ending with you dropping into a cave, which is the third level. At this point it could have just been one level, but I guess they had to fill out an advent calendar quota. Every act of the game you'll go through about 4 of these levels before taking on a boss. Our first boss is the evil snowman. Makes sense, there are lots of snowmen on Christmas, and he looks pretty evil. All he does is throw snow at you while you shoot him from this floating platform. By the way, you can duck in this game. And I swear on our one true Lord and Savior that this is the only time in the entire game where you absolutely need to duck. Anyways, you burn him to death. The prologue didn't say anything about the villains killing people, by the way, so I think Santa might have crossed a moral boundary here and probably became the most evil person in this game. Anyways, you avoid the consequences of your actions every level after a boss by riding your sleigh and dropping the presents you've collected down chimneys. There are no real goals in these levels beyond getting to the ending alive. Delivering presents merely increases your score and, by extension, lives. Here we're flying over England, but there's a lot of twin towers in the backgrounds though. I don't really know geography, but I think that might be the Golden Gate Bridge maybe. After that, you're back to platforming. The longer this game goes on, the more the levels start to experiment, it seems. Like this level, the flooded basement, where you have to outrun rising water. Other levels will have you ride magic carpets, climb ropes, and travel up tubes. There are lots of gimmicks that this game will throw at you, but they hardly change anything beyond slowing you down as you go in a straight line from point A to point B. The worst level in this game is the Wood Factory, with its conveyor belt floors and moving heart platforms. The game's field of view is too small and Santa always shifts closer to the end of the screen when running. Some of these platforms are positioned too far away to see, so you'll have to take leaps of faith just to get through the level, but not before dying because you couldn't see the floating hearts. And why are they hearts in the first place? It just looks like a placeholder asset that they forgot to replace. And just like the levels, the enemies can vary in design as well. Many of them are toys, bugs, animals, and other weird things, but the most common enemies in the game are mice. Most of these enemies, however, just walk back and forth. Some of them might have unique patterns or abilities, like the invincible jumping rocks in the otherworldly stages, or the race cars with 2 lives. But as I said before, most of them just go back and forth, no matter the design. There are at least 3 different mice enemies, for example, but none of them do anything unique from each other. Take these electric ones. You'd think that maybe jumping on them would hurt you or something, but no, you can kill them just as easily as every enemy. A few more levels of conveyor belts and bad platforming, and you'll fight the timekeeper. I don't know what this has to do with Christmas, but he did steal Santa's plans, so he deserves to die. He shoots gears at you, but once you get close to him, he'll roll towards you and across this half pipe. All you have to do is just hit him while he's rolling though. But at least they tried something different. Do this a few more times and he's dead, taking Santa's secrets to the grave. After that, you're flying through Russia, full of falling satellites and this thing. Onward to the next level, it becomes increasingly clear how misleading these title cards are. Here, Santa is facing a polar bear. Sounds exciting. You encounter its cave halfway through and nothing. The bear is sleeping. I thought this was going to be like a mini-boss or maybe a chase sequence, but nothing happens. I even tried to see if there was a trigger of some kind or maybe like an Easter egg to wake it up, like luring an enemy towards it. There isn't. What a letdown. Nothing really changes the standard format of this game, it seems. Your missions in every level is to simply get to the ending or beat a boss. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's weird how Days Before Christmas tries at times to add new gimmicks in some of its levels. Take the caves for example, where you can collect a fire power-up, one of the only power-ups in the entire game, to free reindeer trapped in ice. But I'm pretty sure you don't need them to beat the levels. In fact, I've only collected a single reindeer in this entire playthrough and nothing changed. I still had 2 in the flying stages. It would have changed things up a bit if you had to search around a non-linear area to find them in order to beat the level, but I guess some games are just set in their code. And while I'm ranting, you've probably forgotten about the whole anti-clause thing right about now. Well, let me explain it to you. There are these potions which just look like coffee throughout the game. If you touch one, you turn into Anti-Claus, where your snow attack is replaced with a melee attack, and you're invincible, but you can't collect presents. So it's not like some major power-up or change or anything like that, it's just a really weird trade-off. How long its effects last, and you're not going to believe this, there's an option to change it. Why? So you reach the attic, and this is actually the best level in the entire game. For starters, it's the longest one, and actually has a change in the typical level format. Instead of traveling from left to right, you're traveling upwards, to and back from a switch to unlock a chimney. Then you travel up to the roof and fight your way to the ending. But that's not actually the ending, because now you have to travel down a wide open maze to find a hatch, which takes you to the boss. This is all really climactic, even though it's just leading up to the third quarter boss of the game. Our boss here is just a big mouse. They must have run out of designs at this point in the game. He didn't even give his name either. So here he chases you with a club through a conveyor belt where you have to shoot a switch to drop a weight on him, leaving him open to attacks. It's a formula at this point. Get the boss to chase or attack you and hit them while they're open, but it's probably the most well thought out boss in the entire game. After that, we're flying over Japan, with many hostile kites and mice on rockets. just like real life. So now we're on the final act, where we start out in the North Pole. Sounds exciting, but not really. It's like 25 seconds, again, and you drop down into a cave level, again. Level quota and a deadline. There was another reindeer in this cave, but I missed it and gave up. Interestingly enough, these first 4 levels of the final act are actually consecutive. You go from the North Pole, to the caves, to the basement, to Santa's house. I've played this game way too many times to notice this. Santa's house is the final platforming stage in the game. It's another long level where you fight tough enemies, avoid spiky floors, and swing with these pendulums. A pretty late game gimmick. Once that's cleared out of the way, you go straight to flying over America, with its out-of-control helicopters and flying footballs terrorizing the country. I don't know what this thing is, it's probably made up. And now we're on the final boss, Mr. Weather. This looks really exciting, but he's actually really lame. All you gotta do is get him to shoot electricity into these clouds, and then shoot it back. It looks pretty climactic, but he's actually the easiest boss. Wait, so his name is Mr. Weather, but there's no Mr. Weather in the opening story. There's the cold, so I guess that's him, but that means that Louse is the mouse. I mean, it rhymes, but the Louse is the main antagonist. He was the one that plotted this whole invasion in the beginning. The cold, aka Mr. Weather, was just one of his goons by the looks of it. Now that I think about it too, Louse's whole level leading up to him, the attic, was a very climactic marathon level leading up to his fight. The fight was boring, at least compared to Mr. Weather's shootout in the clouds. But did they swap the bosses? I mean, the game set up the Louse as the main antagonist, and by extension the final boss. And the most common enemies in the game are mice too, his minions. And when you really think about it, the entire 4th act, as I said earlier, is consecutive. You're traveling from the North Pole to Santa's house. So logically, the next level should have been his attic, where you fight Louse, and then you deliver the presents in the ending. But instead, the game goes right to delivering the presents, before fighting Mr. Weather. Like, I guess Louse's boss just didn't sound as exciting as Mr. Weather's, so they just jumbled everything around and then put Mr. Weather at the way ending, and then Louse in the 3rd act. I really need to go outside. So you kill Mr. Weather, aka the Cold, who is the Enrico Pucci of this game, I guess. And the game is over. Ow. Christmas has been saved, and all the kids around the world have received their presents. So Santa, his reindeer, the only one that I saved, and the elves may rest until next year, and next Christmas. So yeah, that was Days Before Christmas. It had its moments of bad platforming and stale level design, but it had its positives as well. The Super Nintendo version's music is pretty good for starters. And it has a pretty good art style as well, reminiscent of a storybook at times. And it did try to make most of its levels stand out visually. At the ending of the day, the game was okay. And that's probably its biggest problem. The worst type of game you can possibly make is an okay one. It's obviously nowhere near as memorable as Mario or Sonic or Mega Man, and it's nowhere near as bad as Action 52. But way more people talk about Action 52 compared to Days Before Christmas. It has its ups and downs, but there's nothing to gush over or make fun of when bringing it up in conversation. I mean, the game's big gimmick was just a power-up that barely changed anything. And judging by the misleading title cards in some of the levels, there were probably a lot of ideas that didn't make it into this game, likely due to a short development time and low budget. It's not criminally underrated, and it's not so bad it's good or anything. It's just a somewhat flawed but kinda charming Christmas-themed platformer. That's the only notable thing about this game. And that's probably why the game never made its way to the US. It would have had an American release, but Sunsoft was suffering bankruptcy in its US division and cancelled the release. And would the release have been worth it? Sure, it could sell well during the holidays because it's a Christmas game, but would anyone buy a Christmas game in May? No. And I guess that's why most Christmas games these days don't market themselves as being about Christmas. Otherwise, you'd only play it once a year. But I guess that's the takeaway from this game. It's not an interesting game 11 months of the year, but it is a pretty charming game to play during the holiday season. It's janky here and there, but the developers put their efforts into other places. They brought the game's world to life with its warm holiday aesthetic and fun artwork. If it weren't a Christmas game, it wouldn't really be worth playing. But as it stands, it's a nice experience I like to play every year. After all, I couldn't have made this video if I didn't get the urge to play it every December, and now I keep noticing weird things every time I play it. So I guess that's all I had to say about this game. Happy holidays, drink plenty of eggnog, and if you have any dogs or cats, don't get a real tree, it's toxic to them. Also, you might not actually be watching this video on Christmas. So, you can have a happy Halloween, a good spring, I don't know. Just, I hope you're safe and well in this crazy, chaotic world that we live in. Okay, goodbye.